Hello, I'm guessing if you've come to this video then you've got a similar problem to what I had on my Ford Galaxy. The model I'm using is a 2009 2-litre TDCi, and basically what I found was that the first problems were that when I tried to lock the central locking, the driver's door and the passenger door, this is on the right hand drive UK model, wouldn't lock. I could lock the back door from the inside and I could lock the driver's door from the key. All the other doors locked okay, and the windows would go up and down on the other doors using their appropriate buttons, but nothing would work from the window panel here, or the mirrors. The electric mirrors wouldn't work, and of course the central locking. I tried finding solutions to this problem in numerous places on the internet, and I found a few things, but nothing that really solved the problem straight off. So I thought I'd do this quick video. I have actually fixed this repair now, but I thought it might be useful to someone else. This model 2009, it has a few differences to the 2010 model in the fuse boxes, so there may be a couple of differences. But what I'm going to take you through is a couple of things I found, a couple of tools I've used, how to get this door trim off, and hopefully we'll get somewhere to helping you. I might just say that you do all these things at your own risk, because obviously you're working with electrics, you're taking power from the battery, you could accidentally short something. So obviously if you're a DIYer, then you do this at your own risk. And obviously if you're in the trade, well, obviously you'd be going and cringing and saying, oh crumbs, I wouldn't do that, or do it this way, whatever. But it solved my problem. So the first thing I would suggest is that I read on a couple of places that the interior light, the one above the mirror, if that's not working, then this can actually cause a problem. It's something to do with the way it takes a power feed. The first thing I do before anything else is check that this is working. In my one it does, but I've read in a few places that this main bulb goes. In a couple of other forums I've read that this bulb had actually been removed. Now what you need to do is check that's working. If it's working, then we can move on to the next step. But if it's not working, first of all try putting a new bulb in, but also check the fuse. Now the fuse will be in the front fuse box, which is underneath the glove box. The fuse box is held, well, it's covered by a piece of carpet above your feet, which is held on by little black plastic clips that are pushed onto these yellow cones. If you just pull them straight off of the two clips, the carpet trim panel will come off, and that is hiding the fuse box and module, which is held up in place by a little quarter turn finger grip. Once you've twisted that out of the way, it's a little bit tricky because it doesn't quite fit into place. It's on a metal panel that doesn't hold properly. Now mine's just dropped out. You slide that back in afterwards. Now on my model there's two rows of fuses on the left hand side, and the interior lamp is the number 10 amp fuse on the left hand side, down below the yellow fuse, and there's yellow fuses on both sides. On the 2010 model, and probably later as well, there's another row of fuses right at the back, and I'm not sure which number that would be. You'd have to look in your own owner's manual. Check your bulb up in your light, check your fuse. If you can get that all working, check your central locking again, because that may have solved your problem. If that hasn't, then we'll move on to the next step. So in my case the light was working, so the next thing I did was I looked at the fuse boxes and found that the door module, which is a control unit which is behind this door trim or door card, is actually powered by a 25 amp fuse in the back of the car. Now when I'm dealing with fuses and things, and being a DIYer, there's a couple of tools fortunately I had just from other projects around the house, and you will need certainly a multimeter. It doesn't need to be an expensive one. The one I'm using just looks like this. Don't worry about the brands or anything. I don't recommend any particular brands or anything like that. But what you will need is you'll need some way of checking resistance. This will be used for the fuse. And you'll also be needing to check for a voltage. So this is a DC voltage. Now on my multimeter it goes up, you know, obviously up high. On a car battery you're talking about 12 volts, so this 20 volt reading is what I'll be using, and I'll be obviously if you've never used one of these, I'm saying obviously, but maybe you haven't used one, there's two connections. There'll be one that will be using to check the live feed, which will be possibly 12 volts, and there'll be one that goes to ground. Now when they say ground or earth, they mean a metal part on the car. So I'm going to go to the back of the car now and then explain to you what I'm testing and how I'm testing. One other gadget I have got, which is in the back of the car, is a sort of probe tester. You can get these reasonably cheaply. They're quite handy and they're good for identifying where power is quickly, but I'll do it with this multimeter because this is probably the usual tool that people may have if they're doing a bit of DIY around the house and stuff. Okay, so here we are at the back of the car on the passenger side, on the side, and we need to take this panel off to get to the rear fuse box. That's the rear fuse box. This panel contains the 4 fuses that control each door module. So we squeeze the 2 bits, there's one there and one there, we squeeze those together, pull that cover off and take it out, and then we can see down the bottom there the 4 25 amp fuses that power the door modules. We can test these fuses first. There's 2 ways. We can do the way of pulling out and having a look at the fuse to see if it's blown, or we can use the multimeter method. I'm just going to pop that back in. So those are in place. Now on the top of the fuses you can just grab the probe so you can see where I am. You can just touch the metal strips of the fuse on both sides. So we're going to use the multimeter to test each one of those 4 to check that they're all okay properly. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to turn the multimeter setting to the resistance mode. Now on mine I've got a beeper, that's what that symbol means. We're actually checking for ohms, so your picture might be like that one. It all depends on what multimeter you've got. So I'm going to try and put this in a stand now so that you can see what's going on. So what I'm going to do with the multimeter set to resistance, I'll probably try it on this first one, which isn't the driver's door module, just so you can see what you're doing, and then you just test all 4 the same. So I'm going to put one probe on one metal strip and the other probe on the other metal strip, and you can hear the beep there. So that means that fuse is okay. So I'm just going to quickly go through all of them. That one's okay, that one's okay, and that's okay. So you could take them out and visually inspect them, or you could just do it that way. The next thing I'm going to do is check that we've got a 12 volt or sort of roundabouts 12 volts supply from the battery to this fuses. Up in there we've got a ground or an earth bolt. I'm going to put a wire onto that just so I can put the camera closer down on the fuses. So I'm just going to clip that on there so you can see what goes on. So all I've done is just use a clamp just to clamp a wire on. It's just a piece of spare wire. It's quite handy actually because we'll use that later on in the back. And again, on the multimeter now, we're going to set this to voltage. And like I said earlier, I'm going to set it on 20 volts DC so that we're sort of covered by the battery. Put that back there. So if we get the end of the wire, I'm going to put my earth probe on that, which is the black one. I'm just going to hold those together in my fingers. We won't get an electric shock or anything if you haven't done this sort of thing before, because it's going through the multimeter. But again, like I said before, you're doing this at your own risk. Now what you're going to watch now is you're not going to touch any other metal parts of the car because you don't want to short anything. Now I'm going to do this on the first fuse. The one I was interested in is the one that's hidden behind the trim, which is a bit harder to see, but I do it on this first one, this end, which is probably one of the back doors because it's all the same. The live power is coming into the fuse and going out of the fuse, or just continuing through the fuse, so it doesn't matter which side you check. And what we want to do is we put it on, and I'm just going to try and hold it there, and on the multimeter you should see we've now got 12.2 volts. so we know that one's okay. Now you need to check this on all 4 of them, and in my case I'm not going to bother going to the first one because I know it's okay, but the first one was the driver's door, like I keep saying. So the next part is that's okay. And what I would recommend is if having that piece of wire on there, is have a long piece of wire, and I've got a big bundle of it, that you can take to the front of the car through the car, because that gives you a good grounding. You know that ground works now, and it's a good grounding for testing when you're testing on the door. So you go back to the front of the car now and do the next step, which is to take the door trim panel off. Right, so back at the front, to take the door trim panel off, we need to start off by taking several screws out. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 underneath, 5, 6 on the outer side of the panel. Those are just normal Phillips screws, so we take those out just by taking them out from here. The next thing to do is using something small and pointy, is to get the little cap off inside the door handle recess, and try not to lose it. And then using I think it's 15 Torx, maybe 20. Let's take that out. So that's the Torx, 20 Torx, the star shaped ones. Again, if you're a DIY, you may not have that, and you'll have to get to your nearest motor factors and just buy that, or a small kit. Then once that's out, you need to get the metal trim off the handle. Now this is a bit hard to prise out, and you probably want to use something like the thinnest screwdriver you can find, and you will probably damage the plastic, so try and do it somewhere where you won't see it. I start at the top, and as you can see there's a little mark there, so it might be better off to start somewhere low. I freed that up with the screwdriver, and then you need to pull that off. And then inside there you've got 2 20, I think they are, Torx. So there's one up in there. And one down in here. That one that I tried taking out earlier didn't come out, so let's take that out. It's a lot easier when you're not trying to hold the camera with one hand. Right, once you've got that, you have to sort of push this trim panel to the left, and then it'll pull out at the front, and then with a bit of wiggling you can take it off. Then up here, this triangular piece at the top, pull it towards the back of the door so that it comes out of the metal clip, and then pull it up and out of the door. There's a couple of little bits it pushes down into, and then finally you just pull the bottom of the door card towards you, out like that, and then lift it up. So I'll try and do this while holding the camera. Be careful as you pull it away, because you have the power lead going to the back of the winder pack. Where the wires go in, there's a little tab, you push that in towards the wires, and then it'll pull out. So this is the door module. Now I thought this was the problem, and so I ordered a second-hand one off of a well-known eBay site, and fitted it on, and it didn't make a blind bit of difference. So that was when I started needing to find out more, and this is where I found wiring diagrams and goodness knows what.